Welcome to the 7 p.m. It's in the book literature study meeting. My name is Eileen, and I am an alcoholic. Everybody, please join me in a moment of silent meditation to reflect on why we are here, followed by the serenity prayer. Serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity, the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In this meeting, we study the entire text of Alcoholics Anonymous and Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Now I get to introduce Meredith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith. I'm an alcoholic. It's great to see everybody tonight. I have an extra book in my car, too, that someone threw out of their truck yesterday at about 11:15 in the morning. Clearly was not for them. And I mean, that guy was not having it. So I'm happy you folks are here. This book appeals to many of us. Evidently not him yet. Okay, so we're studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We started over on the blank page last week, and I was taught to study this as a method of diagnosing myself. We'll throw in some historical facts. They have not been fact checked. So, yeah, some may be just hearsay. Some might be a fact somewhere. We have all kinds of input. We can find out. But meanwhile, I stick a lot just to what it says about the illness itself and am I it? Because if I can relate to the first few chapters, which describe the problem, my thoughts are very simply put, then the solution will work for you. And I was like, wow, it sounded so simple. So we started last week on the blank page, and then we used to do a little kind of an open book quiz to see if we remembered anything from last week. And so one of the questions she would ask is, where is the first promise offered in this book? And we went over it last week. Anybody know where that's found? Beth? Okay, so it's the story of how my sponsor said, I don't know how, and she was right. And then it says, have recovered, past tense, from alcoholism. So it's nice to know that we can recover, and we recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, which is what we are told in the forward to the first edition. What kind of book is it? The textbook, right? That's something we study from and put into practice. And that answer is found on page XI in the preface. All right. And then what did we recover from? A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's on the first page of the forward to the first edition. And that's on page XIII. And then it goes on to say, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So it tells us right off the bat, we're mentally and physically ill. And that's pretty thick. We need a lot of help. And then the main purpose is, of course, to show other alcoholics how to recover, but it helps other people understand that the alcoholic is a very sick person. Because I wasn't even sure how much was illness and how much was just bad behavior. And some of it was just bad behavior as a result from the illness. But physically and mentally ill, we know that so far. And then we started reading the forward to the second edition where we get some history. And the forward to the second edition was written in 1955, which was 16 years after the book was first written. And they talk a little bit more about how it formed with knowledge from different places. Bill got the idea of the allergy from Dr. Silkworth. He got the idea of the spiritual solution from the Oxford groups, page XVI. And then something unusual happened for him. He stayed sober for 6 months, telling everybody he could find in New York that they had to find God because that was the answer to their troubles. And nobody stayed sober except Bill. He was out there, go tell it on the mountain. And they're like, whatever. And Dr. Silkworth said, why don't you talk about the illness of alcoholism first, something they can relate to, and go from there. So that was very helpful. And then when Bill got to Akron and following this business venture that failed miserably, he found that he was in danger of drinking again. And he suddenly realized in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. Suddenly realized this is not something he thought of. This is where I think God intervenes and says, you've been trying to go out like you've got a big answer. And frankly, you need to do this so you stay sober. So it was a shift in the whole approach to this thing that we do it so we stay sober. And in fact, when Dr. Bob got sober as a result of Bill sharing these components, that helped Dr. Bob because he didn't know the physical nature, the grave nature of alcoholism. And as a doctor, when he learned this piece, that physical piece that also condemns the body to die because he can't, it triggers an obsession, it gave him a new hope and a new, it says he mustered, what it said, when he learned about the description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. It gave him a shot in the arm. And then, and so Bill's theory was proved that only one alcoholic can help another, as nobody else could. And on the top of XVII, it also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. And I love that word permanent. I didn't even know you could use that word here. So I really love that. And it's proved itself to be true so far. By staying active in these 12 steps and helping other alcoholics to recovery, I stay right in the middle of the bed. So and then it says on XVI, hence the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. For this reason, these two guys got right to work. They knew their sobriety depended on it. And then it's going to talk more about how this has grown. So by the end of that first summer, a group had formed in Akron. And even though Bill is from New York, the New York group really didn't form till after that. So we have two groups that have started in the two cities where these founders.
Okay. We'll get started reading page XVII. A second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. It was now time, the struggling groups thought, to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous, from the title of its own book. The flying blind period ended, and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time.
Okay, I love how it says a second small group promptly took shape. Bill went back and got busy and got to work. He didn't say, I got to wait till I'm not depressed. It'd be years because he was depressed most of his life. And then it talks about how another group started in Cleveland. And interestingly, this is one of those, is it a fact or not? But it's said that Clarence Snyder, who was a sponsee of Dr. Bob's, started the Cleveland group and was the first one to use the name Alcoholics Anonymous to name the group, separating itself from the Oxford groups completely. And he named it after the title of the book, okay, which is another interesting thing. The fellowship was named after the book. Okay. And he also introduced wholesale sponsorship because of the book and because of the impact that it was having in Cleveland. There were so many people coming for help that people with substantial sobriety. I mean, it says here 2 years is substantial, right? Think about it. 30, 60, 90 days. Doesn't 2 years seem like forever? So it is substantial for someone who's never had any time. And in those days, they weren't putting together time, right? Interestingly, because so many people needed help, Clarence Snyder would start telling his new sponsees, here, give the basic ideas to this guy. You give the basic ideas to this guy. And I like how they talk about that. The basic ideas. The basic ideas were not written out in steps, not like a published volume anywhere. Each recovered alcoholic had their experience of the basic process through whatever way their sponsor took them through it. So they would just pass it on like Indian lore. It'd be word of mouth. So it says here, these guys had the basic ideas, and then when they traveled out of the area, they would take these basic ideas to others. So it says here, now they got to get this unique experience out in front of the world. Now, I love that phrase, unique experience, because that was what Bill's theory was, that only an alcoholic could help another alcoholic. And that is a new therapeutic model. If we look at one of the appendices in the back, just to drive this home, it's the appendices, the fourth appendix called the Lasker Award. Okay. And it's a short one, but since they mention unique experience, it's the closest we're ever going to get to this appendix. So I like to go there now. And Eileen, go ahead and read that. It's on page 571.
The Lasker Award. In 1951, the Lasker Award was given Alcoholics Anonymous. The citation reads in part as follows. The American Public Health Association presents a Lasker Group Award for 1951 to Alcoholics Anonymous in recognition of its unique and highly successful approach to that age-old public health and social problem, alcoholism. In emphasizing alcoholism as an illness, the social stigma associated with this condition is being blotted out. Historians may one day recognize Alcoholics Anonymous to have been a great venture in social pioneering, which forged a new instrument for social action, a new therapy based on the kinship of common suffering, one having a vast potential for the myriad other illnesses, other ills of mankind.
That just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because we look now and see where it's come and how many other fellowships have been formed and how many other therapies have been. Who was it? Tybert, who was a father of a group therapy. And even that, like people suffering in the same place. So I really appreciate that they realized this was a unique experience and had to be put out before the world long before it was recognized in 1951. And they talked about the fledgling society just learning how to fly. The publication AA Comes of Age talks a lot about the early days and the mistakes they made, and which helped form the traditions. And so there were a lot of Flying Blind ended. Now they have a textbook to refer to for a process. All right.
Okay, keep reading. With the appearance of the new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick.
He's the one that started group therapy.
Right. Okay.
Like I said, there are the facts and then there's the truth.
Well, wait, but he's a noted clergyman.
Right.
Okay. Reviewed it and with approval. In the fall of 1939, Fulton Alsler, then editor of Liberty, printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought a rush of 800 frantic inquiries into the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. Each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. Businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. New groups started up, and it was found, to the astonishment of everyone, that AA's message could be transmitted in the mail as well as by word of mouth. By the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery. In the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends, to which he invited AA members to tell their stories. News of this got on the world wires. Inquiries poured in, and again, many people went to the bookstores to get the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. In March 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000. Then Jack Alexander wrote a feature article in the Saturday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. By the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000 members. The mushrooming process was in full swing. AA had become a national institution.
Okay, so in this book, Pass It On, this is Bill Wilson's expanded story, and there's some great detail about these days, and the numbers are just astonishing to me. The 800 inquiries in the beginning of 1939 that were all painstakingly answered by Ruth Hawk, answer and add to work for the honest dealer. What are they called? The something dealers, honor dealers. And that's what they used to publish the book at first, the honor dealers. But she didn't know what she was applying to. And she said, Bill had a visitor. Ruth found herself overhearing fragments of an odd conversation. Drunken misery, miserable wife, drunk as a disease. When she heard Bill and Hank roaring with laughter shortly afterward, she thought them rather hard-hearted, but the pay was good and she liked the men, so she decided to stay. So she didn't even know what she was getting into, but she's the one that brought the Serenity Prayer to them. But she also painstakingly answered all these inquiries. And so they learned, of course, and then they would send people out. They were able to successfully transmit to the new members of AA, hey, you got to pass this on. You're going out of town on business to Kansas City, here, take a book and go see this guy. And these inquiries that were answered, they try to link people up, and it was done person to person. And so when you think about the mushrooming process, these little groups springing up here and here and there, that it happened mostly by word of mouth and person to person because they didn't have social media, television. So it's really astounding. And then, of course, the dinner where Jack Alexander wrote the article as a result of that and put such a compelling picture before the world that it really, that also in March 1941, there was about, in early 1940, 800 people. And the end of, by March 1941, 2,000. By the end of 41, 8,000. That was, 1941, my mother was 15, and she read that article and she did her senior paper on Alcoholics Anonymous. And because she knew there was something about her mother, and she ended up writing her paper about it, became alcoholic anyways. But just fascinating that this got such attention because it worked. It was the first thing that ever worked. The dark world of the alcoholic. Think about what your world was like right before you came in. How hopeless were you feeling? How isolated? Thank you.
Breaks, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, this thing about anonymity, I remember they would say that it's about out there. In here, we don't have to be anonymous. I mean, back in those days, how would anybody find anybody if they didn't know their last name? They couldn't call them. They had to know their last name. But the practice gets, so we forget. We take it, we're too casual about it, I think. And certainly where social media is concerned, I think it is, I don't know, I'm not sure that the whole idea of attraction rather than promotion, I'm pretty sure my ego is not wired for a lot of more. And it's funny because I wanted to be a famous actress at one time. And I think it's interesting that I have a reputation in an anonymous society where almost nobody knows my life. It's like, that's what I get. So, God does, he knows me. All right.
Okay. Our society then entered the fearsome and exciting adolescence period. The test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? Would there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money?
Mm-hmm.
Would there be striving for power and prestige?
Yeah.
Would there be schisms which would split AA apart?
Some.
Soon AA was beset by these problems on every side and in every group. But out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AA had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. As we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society.
What tradition's that? Okay, good.
It's a test. It's
Yep.
just wake up every day.
Yeah, you gotta pay attention.
That our leaders might serve but never govern.
Which one's that?
Achieve it.
Our leaders are but just as there. There we go. Okay.
Okay. Each group was autonomous, and there was to be no professional class of therapy. There were to be no fees or dues. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary contributions.
7.
There you go. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service ads.
9.
Look at you. You
rolled them in here.
All right, Center. It's a funny thing.
Book study.
Okay, invite them in for next quiz next week, guys. Our public relations were to be based upon attraction rather than promotion.
11.
Okay. It was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and film.
11, yep.
In no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies.
Okay, yeah, let's go next. Okay, so here's the thing. These are principles that were developed. What is a principle?
Code of conduct.
All right, so we use this word a lot, so we probably should know what it means.
And then look there.
Some people say those are not the principles. The principles are the steps. And so we can have some wonderful debates here. Step 10 versus 11, that's recovering. There's another one. But the point is, those are, in essence, behind them. I don't know that it was drafted that way, but obviously if we're going to admit we're powerless over alcohol, their lives have become unmanageable, we had to be completely honest with ourselves. So there's a link. And those are easier. I understand what those mean, but the idea is they are codes for conduct, accepted rules for behavior. And if we learn in how it works, they are a measure of our spiritual progress. So if I want to know how am I doing, how well am I working these principles? You know,
Are you lying? Are you hopeful? Are you helping?
am I pressing on regardless? Yeah, I like that. All right. So, so principles are, a rule or believed governing behavior. So they're not, they like to say they're not enforced like rules, but they are a general way we can agree on conduct. All right.
Okay. This was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 561 of this book. Though none of these principles had the force of rules or laws, they had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has.
Yeah. 3,000 people at that first conference in Cleveland.
What didn't Bill kind of slide it through them?
All I know is that that's when they did it.
Yeah. I think he was afraid of all. He kind of slid it through so that it could get voted on. Thank God.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of us don't really know what they were. And we're just like, okay. And then we find out as we go.
Okay. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large numbers of recoveries and reunited homes. These made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed.
So there's the math word problem in the text. And a lot of people come up with different numbers, but the idea is that it had a much higher success rate than it does today. Even in one of the other appendices, it talks about a 60% success rate. And, when I do this math, 50% stay sober at once, 25% gets sober eventually. That's 75%. Of the remainder, 2/3, that's another 16 people. So 75 plus 16 is 81. It's still high numbers no matter how you look at it. But that's because it hadn't become a lot of variances to it yet, and people were very desperately sick. The ones that came really wanted it. And like it says, the two main reasons: recoveries and reunited homes. Remember, back then, the husbands that were out in the street were literally out in the street. They weren't in halfway houses. They weren't in recovery residences. They were either in the psych ward or in the street. And so for those people to get well and be, employable again and members of the family, it's miraculous. So you can also see with those smaller numbers, you see the miracles more widely too, because there's not that many to see. So they make an income. And so, yes, a wide acceptance of AA. And when they talk about wide, they're going to talk more about what that includes.
Did we read that paragraph without the wide acceptance?
I don't think so. I think so. Where we go now.
Another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the ministration of friends in medicine, religion, and the press. Together were innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. Without such support, AA could have only made the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book.
Okay, that's the only time they talk about it, so that's where we're going. If we don't do it now, we're never going to read them. So the first one we're going to look at, there's medical and religious societies, right? We'll look at 3, the medical view on AA.
Since Dr. Silkworth's first endorsement,
Page 569.
569.
569.
Medical societies and physicians throughout the world have set their approval upon us. Following are excerpts from the comments of doctors present at the annual meeting of the Medical Society of the State of New York, where a paper on AA was read.
In 1944.
Okay. Dr. Foster Kennedy, neurologist. This organization of Alcoholics Anonymous calls on two of the greatest reservoirs of power known to man, religion and that instinct for association with one's fellows, the herd instinct. I think our profession must take appreciative cognizance of this great therapeutic weapon. If we do not do so, we shall stand convicted of emotional sterility and of having lost the faith that moves mountains, without which medicine can do little.
I love that they acknowledge that even though they're medical doctors, we need God. I also like that it says that we have the two basic needs, religion or belief in something greater. There's got to be something more, right? Because it anchors us to something. And also the instinct for association with one's fellows, which, if you were like me, that was destroyed by my alcoholism. I became an isolator. And when I was encouraged to go with other sponsees somewhere, I was like, or go to lunch with us. I don't know what to say to people, so it was very awkward. So getting back into it is very hard. So even though we resist, once we get back a sort of a nest, we feel better, don't we? Than feeling like we're in self-constructed prisons. And I like how they talk about therapeutic weapon. A therapy is curative, and a weapon, something that we can fight back with. Okay. So I love that, the wording is not lost on me, how amazing this is. And notice the field these doctors are in. On this page, we have a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a psychiatrist. They know how sick we are.
Dr. G. Kirby Collier, psychiatrist, I have felt that AA is a group unto themselves, and their best results can be had under their own guidance. As a result of their philosophy, any therapeutic or philosophic procedure which can prove a recovery rate of 50 to 60% must merit our consideration.
So here we are, 1944, 29, what's that, 15 years? Is that 15 years? Yeah. He's saying, trust these people with their own guidance.
Dr. Henry M. Thibault, psychiatrist. As a psychiatrist, I have thought a great deal about the relationship of my specialty to AA, and I have come to the conclusion that our particular function can very often lie in preparing the way for the patient to accept any sort of treatment or outside help. I now concede that the psychiatrist's job to be the task of breaking down the patient's inner resistance so that which is inside him will flower, as under the activity of the AA program.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it turns out he became acquainted with AA because he had patients that were working the program. And he saw remarkable changes in them. So he became one of the movement's greatest advocates. And I love how he talks about our best job is break down that ego. Get them to go. Get them to get help. Right? We just don't want the help. And then I like too where it says, when that happens, when the inner resistance is broken down, that which is inside him will flower, as under the activity of the AA program. So the curative aspect of AA is the actions we take here, okay, which bring us back to life on the inside.
Okay. Dr. W.W. Bauer, broadcasting under the auspices of American Medical Association in 1941 over the NBC network, said in part, Alcoholics Anonymous are no crusaders, not a temperance society. They know that they must never drink. They help others with similar problems. In this atmosphere, the alcoholic often overcomes his excessive concentration upon himself, learning to depend upon a higher power and absorb himself in his work with other alcoholics. He remains sober day by day. The days add up into weeks, and the weeks into months and years.
Okay, so he's on the radio. So now we're getting out there on the radio, but I love how it says we get over ourselves. They see very clearly what our problem is excessive concentration upon himself, and then learning to depend on a higher power. We don't come in here and say, yeah, I can't wait. A lot of us, it's something we have to learn. And then also absorb ourselves, become absorbed in the work so that we essentially disappear in what we're doing to help somebody else. I just love it. And I like how it says the days add up to weeks, the weeks into months and years. After a while, you're not counting anymore. And that means the obsession's gone.
Dr. John F.
Stouffer,
Chief Psychiatrist, Philadelphia General Hospital, citing his experience with AA, said the alcoholics we get here in Philadelphia General are mostly those who cannot afford private treatment, and AA is by far the greatest thing we have been able to offer them. Even among those who occasionally land back in here again, we observed a profound change in personalities you would hardly recognize.
That's I love that. And I've sponsored somebody who I've seen not get it the first time, but I've seen a profound change in personality. So even if it doesn't take on the first pass, as long as they don't die out there, things can improve. And so I love that too. I love how even if you can't afford any private treatment, because that's the way I came in. I just came to meetings. I wasn't that physically dependent, but I was certainly upset. I had the obsession and full farce. So that was me straight up AA.
The American Psychiatric Association requested in 1949 that a paper be prepared by one of the older members of Alcoholics Anonymous to be read at the association's annual meeting of that year. This was done, and the paper was printed in the American Journal of Psychiatry for November 1949. And this address is now available, and you can read all of that.
Yeah, and then certainly now online you can play these talks. And that's pretty cool. And then the other one we're going to read, and we've got time, is the religious view on AA.
Okay. That's on 572. Clergymen of practically every denomination had given AA their blessing. Edward Dowling, S.J. of Queen's Works staff says Alcoholics Anonymous is natural. It is natural at the point where nature comes closest to the supernatural, namely in humiliations and in consequence humility. There is something spiritual about an art museum or a symphony, and the Catholic Church approves of our use of that. There is something spiritual about AA too, and Catholic participation in it almost invariably results in poor Catholics becoming better Catholics.
Okay, so what they talk about the supernatural and natural thing, the idea is that when we live our natural lives in this world where we become alcoholics, it drives us to our knees, and only then do we have an opportunity to approach the supernatural. That's when we're going to seek a power greater than ourselves. It's the link.
The Episcopal magazine, The Living Church, observes editorially, the basis of the technique of Alcoholics Anonymous is the truly Christian principle that a man cannot help himself except by helping others. The AA plan is described by the members themselves as self-insurance. This self-insurance has resulted in the restoration of physical, mental, and spiritual health and self-respect to hundreds of men and women who would be hopelessly down and out without its unique but effective therapy.
Okay. I love that too. That's very simple. The truly Christian principle that we help ourselves by helping others. And they refer to the AA plan, remembering that it's just not the AA fellowship of hanging out together. It's the plan we follow to get the recovery we need. And I like where it says, this will restore us mentally, physically, and spiritually, and even maybe most importantly, our self-respect, because I could not forgive myself. I could not tell myself, well, now that I'm getting better, I'm a better person. It had to sort of come as a result of taking these actions and helping other people. It was a byproduct of the way this plan was followed. And that was the only way it was going to happen for me. And then, of course, they reiterate this idea that without this unique but effective therapy, unique meanings, one of a kind, this equal footing, one sufferer helping another sufferer who's been there and done that. Okay.
Speaking at a dinner given by John D. Rockefeller Jr. to introduce Alcoholics Anonymous to some of his friends, Dr. Henry Emerson Fosdick remarked, I think that, psychologically speaking, there is a point of advantage in the approach that is being made in this movement that cannot be duplicated. I suspect that if it is wisely handled, and it seems to be in wise and prudent hands, there are doors of opportunities ahead of this project that may surpass our capacities to imagine. And then the asterisk, Father Ed was an early and wonderful friend of the AA. He died in the spring of 1960.
That really gets me. We're farther out in the future to read back on this and just see how extraordinary, how prophetic all these words were. And unfortunate we really are. And I think it's important that, we've got to stay in this, even if we've been here a while, to stay active in this so we can maintain the hope and not get too jaded about our good lives. There's always but what if I had, it's good if we can just stop and say, gee, this is This never would have happened without Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we've got a fighting chance here. We're not going to read any more tonight. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Quiet, but a very valued group. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for a good meeting.
Thank you, Narrow.